Hello and welcome to this video teaching on the age of the Grand Canyon. My name is Jay Rice. If you haven't done so, I encourage you to please hit the subscribe button down below so you can be notified of future content, and also feel free to please share this video. At some point in time or another, we've all heard that the age of the Grand Canyon is millions of years old. But I have to ask, what you believe to be true, is it true? Or do you believe that it's true because you were taught that it's true and never looked any further? We're going to be looking at Mount St. Helens, otherwise known as the Little Grand Canyon. Here's an article that is based off this teaching, in case you want to look it up. It's very interesting, or you can just follow along. So we have 7 wonders of Mount St. Helens. Number 1 is mountain rearranged beyond recognition in 9 hours. Mount St. Helens was acclaimed the most beautiful of the Cascade Peaks. Cone-shaped and snow-covered, it towered over heavily forested deep ravines with a crystal-clear lake to its north. In March 1980, magma began moving up into the mountain, wedging it apart. A powerful earthquake at 8:32 a.m. on May 18th caused the north slope to plunge into the valleys below, releasing the pressure within with a lateral northward fan-shaped explosion. This initial 8-minute blast destroyed 600 square kilometers of forest. The mountain continued to erupt until evening, expending the power of 20,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs. In those 9 hours, the top 1/4 and entire center of the mountain disappeared, leaving a vast, gaping horseshoe-shaped crater. Deep ravines were filled, 75 meters of material was deposited on the bottom of the lake, and the river that drained the north and northwest sides of the mountain was buried under an average of 45 meters of deposit. In just 9 hours, the region had become a hideous, lifeless moonscape. Number 2, canyons formed in 5 months. In the 5 months following the eruption, 2 canyons were formed by mud and pyroclastic flows, establishing drainages for the 1.5 times 2 mile crater. The primary drainage, Step Canyon, is up to 200 meters deep. To its east is Loowit Canyon. Both canyons cut through 30 meters of solid rock. Creeks flow through each canyon. The typical evolutionary explanation is that a creek slowly forms a canyon over vast ages. In this case, we know that the canyons were formed quickly. Then a stream began to run through them. Textbooks say the most spectacular canyon in the world, the Grand Canyon, was formed by stream erosion over 100 million years. Now, scientists who specialize in geological erosion believe it was formed rapidly, just like these canyons at Mount St. Helens. Number 3, Badlands formed in 5 days. Badlands topography is found in the southwest and in South Dakota. It occurs where loose material has been eroded in areas of rock structures, leaving a jagged but picturesque landscape. The standard explanation for such landforms is that water over the centuries washed away the loose materials, leaving freestanding, towering rock patterns. At Mount St. Helens, the massive landslide carried huge amounts of ice and snow with it, burying them in the deep valley to the north. Throughout the day, 10 meters of 290 degrees Celsius ash was also deposited, which quickly melted that ice, causing it to flash to steam. This is the same energy process that caused the explosions up in the mountain throughout the day. Water expands 1,700 times when it turns to steam. When this happens, instantaneously, it is an explosion. Eventually, through similar explosions, all the water was used up. When the red-hot ash covering the buried ice and snow in the valley caused that ice to melt and flash to steam, something called steam explosion pits, which were up to 40 meters deep, were formed. They had nearly vertical sides until gravity collapsed them to produce a rill and gully effect, one of the features of Badlands topography. Rills, by the way, are small gullies. The Great Badlands features in the U.S. could also have been produced by catastrophic forces and some by volcanic action. Number 4, layered strata formed in 3 hours. On June 12, 1980, a third explosive eruption produced 8 meters of stratification that amazed geologists. Successive layers are traditionally thought to require long periods of time to form, yet upwards of 100 layers accumulated mostly between the nighttime hours of 9 and 12. While a plume swiftly ascended 9 miles above the mountain, wave after wave of pyroclastic flows began hurtling out of the crater and down the north slope, each dusting the valley below with another lamination. Measuring from a fraction of an inch to over a yard in thickness, each took from a few seconds to a few minutes to form. Geologist Steven Austin described these pyroclastic flows as ground-hugging, fluidized, turbulent slurries of fine volcanic debris. They moved down the mountainside at hurricane speeds and left deposits of 540 degrees Celsius. One would expect each deposit to be homogenized and thoroughly mixed. Remarkably, these high-velocity slurries of red-hot ash and pumice separated into coarse and fine particles of perfectly defined layers. Such features follow laws governing flows demonstrated in laboratory sedimentation tanks. Similar thin layering appears in the peat sandstones of the Grand Canyon. Conventional wisdom says they were formed by slow and continuous sedimentation over long ages. Both gas-charged slurries, which form the Mount St. Helens strata, and water-charged slurries, which form the peat strata, follow the same laws of physics. The volcano has demonstrated that such formations can be formed rapidly. A global flood would have produced tapeats in a brief time. Number 5. A river system formed in 9 hours. The landslide of May 18th had buried the river and highway to Spirit Lake to an average 45 meters. It also buried most other drainages in the 60 square kilometer of the Upper Toutle Valley and plugged the valley's mouth. For 22 months, no established path for water to the Pacific Ocean existed. Then, on March 19, 1982, an eruption melted a large snowpack that had accumulated in the crater over the winter. The waters mixed with loose material on the slopes of the mountain, creating an enormous mudflow. In 9 hours, while no eye watched, the mudflow carved an integrated system of drainages over much of the valley and reopened the way to the Pacific Ocean. The drainages included at least 3 canyons 30 meters deep. One was nicknamed the Little Grand Canyon of the Toutle because it is a 1/40th scale model of the Grand Canyon. Much water or mud accomplishes rapidly what a little water or mud takes an eternity to accomplish. Evolutionary geologists assign long periods of time to the formation of the 40,000 square kilometer channeled scablands of eastern Washington. However, in the 70s, they finally acknowledged that this vast geologic formation, which includes the Grand Coulee, was formed mostly in 2 days as a result of a catastrophic event. Catastrophic events best explain the great erosionary formations on the Earth's surface. The histories of the nearly 300 people groups speak of an event adequate to the job, the global flood, which you can learn more about on one of my previous videos dealing with the cultural stories of the global flood. Number 6. Sinking logs look like many aged forests in just 10 years. 1 million trees were washed into Spirit Lake the day of the main eruption. As the years go by one, they become waterlogged and sink to the bottom. Dense rootwood is still a part of 10% of the logs. These logs sink to the bottom in an upright position, and their roots quickly become covered by the continuing sedimentation washing into the lake. They give the appearance they grew and died where they are deposited, one forest on top of another over long periods of time. Such formations are found in other places, including Specimen Ridge in Yellowstone National Park. There, geologists found forests rooted in 27 different layers in the ridge and concluded they were observing 27 successive forests. The interpretive sign at Specimen Ridge expressed their error. It read, "Buried within the volcanic rock that composed the mountain are 27 distinct layers of fossil forest that flourished 50 million years ago." Today, the truth is out and the sign is gone. Scientists realize that the Spirit Lake phenomena explains Specimen Ridge. The trees floated on a lake, became waterlogged, and sank to the bottom over a period of time, giving the appearance of multiple forests that grew one on top of another. The 50 million year formation could have formed in just a few years, plus the time necessary for petrifying the logs, 100 to 1,000 years. Number 7. A new model for quicker coal formation. Dr. Steven Austin wrote his doctoral dissertation at Penn State University on a new model for coal formation based on his study of a coal field in Kentucky. While geologists have used a peat swamp model to explain coal formation for over 100 years, Austin argued that explanation doesn't fit because coal is coarsely textured like bark, not finely textured like swamp peat. Swamp peat contains root material, coal does not. Swamp peat rests on a layer of soil, coal often rests on a rock layer. No swamp peat has been found partly formed into coal. Austin advanced a floating mat model that a watery catastrophe stripped away millions of acres of forest and tangled them into mats. The mats floated on an ocean over Kentucky, bumping against one another and dropping their bark to the bottom. Subsequent volcanic activity provided heat and pressure, the final ingredients used in laboratories to produce coal. The result was rich seams of coal in Kentucky and a PhD for Austin. Just 10 months later, Mount St. Helens erupted, dumping vast amounts of vegetation into Spirit Lake, including 1 million logs. Dr. Austin found the logs on the lake stripped of their bark. The bottom of the lake was strewn with up to 3 feet of bark mixed with other vegetation and sediment. To this day, the material remains as merely slowly decaying vegetation. But if a catastrophe supplies the right amount of heat and pressure, the material will quickly change to coal. Dr. Austin's research indicates that the idea of coal formation requiring millions of years is highly questionable. Here we have Canyon Lake Gorge. Canyon Lake Gorge is a gorge around 1 mile long, hundreds of yards wide, and up to 50 feet or more deep. It was carved in just 3 days in a Texas flood. In 2002, floodwaters flowed for several weeks, but the highest discharge, during which the bulk of the erosion took place, was over a period of just 3 days. Next we have Burlingame Canyon. As you can see the before and after picture, the before picture on top and the after picture on bottom. In 1926, Burlingame Canyon near Walla Walla, Washington, a small-scale analogy to Grand Canyon, which was observed to form in less than 6 days. It measures 450 meters or 1,500 feet long, up to 35 meters deep or 120 feet deep, and again as wide, winding through a hillside. Next we have Providence Canyon. Providence Canyon, Georgia. The 1,109-acre park includes 16 canyons, some as deep as 150 feet. Historical accounts indicate that the canyon began forming in the early 1800s as the result of poor soil management practices. So as you can see here, the ideology of those who refuse to acknowledge the flood's geological force is discussed in 2 Peter 3, 5-6, which says, "For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished." So again I ask, what you believe to be true, is it true? Or do you believe that it's true because you were taught that it's true and never looked any further? Well, I hope you've enjoyed this teaching on the age of the Grand Canyon. I encourage you again to hit the subscribe button if you haven't, so you can be notified of future content, and please feel free to share this video. Thank you.